Step into the realm of limitless imagination with Beyond the Art, where Indigenous creativity knows no bounds. Join us on a captivating journey through Indigenous art and innovation.
Together, let's delve into the depths of imagination, pushing boundaries with guests from diverse sectors of the Native American art world, each sharing their unique creative vision and inspiring journeys.
Join us for exclusive interviews, thought-provoking discussions, and uplifting stories.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Beyond the Arts. I'm your host, Joe Williams. My co-host, Cray Beaumont Flynn, is off today. Today, we're thrilled to be joined by the extraordinary artist Marie Watt. Marie is a member of the Seneca Nation, and her interdisciplinary work explores community, storytelling, and Indigenous knowledge. Marie, we're excited to have you here. Your work is so rich with meaning and collaboration, especially with like the sewing circles to your iconic blanket works, the towers. We're excited to dive into your process and inspiration. So thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
So your work is interdisciplinary. It incorporates textiles, beadwork, sculptures, and even neon. Can you share a little bit about how you first came into the world of art and what drew you to such a wide range of mediums?
I think as a kid, I always liked making things, whether it was mud pies or working with ceramics. And I went to a small liberal arts university called Willamette University. And I think one of the things that was so great about going to a liberal arts school is that I was required to take classes in different disciplines. And it was really the first time I got to take an art class at school. And the high school I had gone to, if you were like sort of college bound, then you were taking kind of college core curriculum, and it did not include the arts, which I actually think is pretty shameful. But I finally took my first art class in college, and I really enjoyed it. And it was homework that didn't feel like work. And I became a art history and art major, as well as a communications major. And that was really kind of the beginning. And I think then from there, like when I graduated, I didn't feel like I had quite, I didn't have like the in-depth art learning experience that I kind of sought. And I had learned about the Institute of American Indian Arts. And I feel like it was really going to, at that time, it was called, going to IAIA, that I really started kind of, exploring this interest further. But it's been a meandering path, I will say. I'm not one of those people who knew absolutely that this was something I wanted to do from a really young age.
So your work is rooted in your identity as a member of the Seneca Nation, and your pieces often draw on Indigenous knowledge. How do these cultural influences shape your artistic process, and how do they manifest in the themes of your work?
I would love to just give a little bit more a context for what my experience of being Seneca is like in the world, because I think that we all as members of different tribes, we still, have different stories and experiences. So my mom grew up on the Cattaraugus Reservation, and my grandparents' first language is Seneca. But my mom, was the first in her family to go to college. She got a degree in nursing, and she was offered a job at the University of Washington Hospital in Seattle, Washington. And I think she thought it would just be a fun experience. Maybe she'd be in Seattle for a few years, but that's where she met my dad. And she continued to work as a nurse for a while. And then at some point, my dad was laid off from work at Boeing. And somebody told him, this would have been in the 70s, but somebody said, hey, there's this job for an Indian education specialist. You should think about applying. And which I think tells you something about that moment, that like a white guy could like apply to be like a specialist in Indian education just because he was married to a Native woman. But my mom basically told him like he wasn't going to apply for that position. She was. And so my experience with it as a Seneca person, was like both being kind of involved in the urban Indian community of the Pacific Northwest, the Daybreak Star Center in Seattle, as well as my mom sort of, running this Indian education program for 3 different school districts. So that all like really has like informed my experiences in the world as being an artist. And I think that in some ways it's being dislocated from the Native community or Native communities or urban Indian communities. That's like kind of like was the catalyst for me looking for a way to ground myself in my culture. And so it meant, working with corn husks, and it drew me to working with blankets. I'm really interested in how in my family, like we give away a blanket to honor people for being witness to important life events. And also how blankets are kind of highly, prized and regarded in in a lot of Indigenous communities. It's not just unique to being Seneca. So I think that that's like one of the things that drew me to using that particular material in my work.
I want to talk a little bit about the sewing circles. They're such a unique part of your practice, bringing people together to create collaboratively. Can you talk about the inspiration behind the sewing circles and how they fostered intergenerational and cross-disciplinary conversations?
Yeah, the process of how of doing sewing circles was really organic. And I would say at first, I was preparing for a show curated by Truman Lowe at the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian at the George Gustav High branch in New York City. And I knew I wanted to make these wall pieces that were hand stitched. I think that I was really, and I remain drawn to this today. I'm just like so interested in how, like, when you use one's hand, how it's how much it indicates, I guess, like one's body and one's voice, and in a way, like I think one of the things became really interested in when multiple people are around a piece and stitching, when those threads start to intersect, how it's maybe a metaphor for how we're connected and related. So the story, one of the things though that happened really that was the catalyst for the sewing circles is I wanted to like stitch everything by hand. And at some point I realized that it was going to be like impossible for me to do alone. And I decided that I would invite people over. My home was where my studio was. And so I invited people over and I said I would feed them. They could come go as they wished, and no sewing experience was required. And I think one of the things that like I instantly learned was just that when your eyes are diverted and you're working with something as intimate as cloth, stories just flow. And I think that people who like maybe intended to stay for just a short bit, like actually stayed much longer. And one of the things that I really loved is that there were people who I even had maybe known deeply, but there were stories about them that also came out that I had never learned before. And so, that was the beginning of the sewing circles, but I think like I thought of it as like a barn raising where many hands make light work. And that I would also help other people, raise their barns, so to speak. And I quickly realized, though, that sewing circles weren't a means to an end. It wasn't a means to making peace. It like what was created by everybody, and that was and remains like the community of people and voices and stories in that moment.
Your blanket towers are iconic, and they carry so much symbolic weight. Can you explain the significance of the blankets in your work, and how the towers are both personal and collective memory, or how they speak to both personal and collective memory?
Yeah. I mean, I think the very first blanket sculpture I like sought to make, I was really interested in referencing linen closets and like conifers of the Pacific Northwest. Also the totems or totem poles. And but for me, more than anything, it was this like it's this ladder-like form that connects sky and ground, and or sky and earth. And I thought of it as like a way of sort of talking about our Haudenosaunee creation story, in which Sky Woman um, is peering through a hole in the sky world, and some say she fell, others say she was pushed. But as she tumbles, she's first um, assisted by birds who create like a soft landing, and then helped by animals in what we now call Turtle Island. And so that was like really one of the references, like for that early work.
You also draw connections between your beadwork and your use of neon in your recent works, which I find intriguing. How do you come to see neon as an extension of your beadwork tradition, and how does it fit into your exploration of storytelling?
I had a conversation with a friend. I think we were talking about beads, and I think I had used neon gaffer tape to imply uh, neon glass. And in this conversation, the friend said, one of the things that I like about your use of materials is that it's like a tape can be a bead, glass can be a bead, neon can be a bead. And so I became really interested in this idea of like language, kind of taking on the let's see. I think I'm really interested in language's elasticity, and like how can we um I'm trying to figure out how to say this. How can we assign words meaning that go beyond how we kind of traditionally oh my God, I'm really struggling here. Well, how can we like talk about the meaning of a word that goes beyond like what its historical assignment, maybe? And so I
Yeah,
don't know. What are we thinking?
I'm yeah, I think I'm tracking here because culture evolves. We move forward in time, and so uh, the concept of neon being an extension of the bead is just sort of like the evolution of what the process looks like in the 21st century as opposed to the 20th or the 19th century,
Exactly.
in a sense.
Exactly. And what drew me then to neon in particular, and where in my mind it really is both a bead and a cord, is that when it's hot, it's malleable and sort of cord like, right? And
Mhm.
simultaneously, it's glass and it's hollow. It's this tube, and that is like kind of what makes it bead like. And so, one of the things that I've played with then is like sort of as I use neon to express text, I have started stitching with it, and so. It
Hmm.
seemed like a natural extension of my process for those reasons.
Hmm. Yeah, I think folks often sort of lose the context of that beadwork um, was always contemporary, right? It was made by contemporary people for contemporary
Yeah,
means, and your work is reflective of this, especially the stacked pieces. The first time I saw that, uh, it just kind of spoke to the closets that we had when I was growing up. You walk in, and so it's very reminiscent of, again, just the contemporary spaces that we occupy. So your work has been shown in some of the world's most prestigious museums, from the Whitney to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. How has this level of visibility impacted your work and the way the audiences engage with the themes that you're exploring?
I guess I would say that the visibility has like really allowed me to work as an artist full time. So I don't know if that's really like about visibility. Sorry, I'm like really thinking about this question. Let's see.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, hmm. I mean, I would say that I think the thing that I'm excited about in being represented in different collections, such as the Whitney or the Met, is that it's I'm excited that my kids um, and other people from our communities can see work that's not only presented in like kind of more uh, anthropological collections or kind of darkly lit
Hmm.
collections or like I
Hmm.
think for me the
Hmm.
exciting thing is just having the work in the world without the same sort of like I don't know parameters in which like when I was growing up and seeing artwork by our ancestors, it was like in like radically different spaces. They were oftentimes like anthropology collections of institutions or in, kind of like more darkly lit spaces where I think it was harder to understand these objects as being living objects from our
Hmm.
communities that are dynamic and thriving uh, I'm looking for one more word. Dynamic, thriving, and you know, uh, like I don't know, optimistic. I don't know what the words should be, but
Well, in a sense, too, it normalizes the experience for the kids,
right?
right?
Yeah,
To see uh, works from their culture in the space of other contemporary spaces, right? It's not the sideshow or the the special event, the separated event that it was, 20, 30, 40 years
right,
ago.
right.
So you're, in addition to your sculptures and your textile work, you've spoken about the importance of language in your
Mhm.
practice, with words like turtle island, ancestor, companion species appearing frequently in your work. Can you talk about how language plays a role in your art and why these words are significant?
Yeah. I think I guess actually language like first made an appearance in my work when I was installing these, kind of columnar blanket sculptures. And I would have a book out, like a blank book out, where people could share blanket stories. And one of the things that sort of amazed me is just like how generous people were with what they shared in these books. And so, like that was like kind of the very first time where there was, I would say, this collaboration and exchange between myself and the public that happened within the intimacy of this blank book. And so, fast forward to this, present moment. Um, I was thinking like there was, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I started asking this question, like, what would the world look like if we thought of ourselves as companion species? And this question came about like thinking about my relationship to animals as a person who is Haudenosaunee. We have our clans, our animals, and it's a way of us acknowledging their historic relationship to helping Sky Woman start her life on Turtle Island. And I started thinking about how in Western culture, maybe the relationship with animals as being sort of familial was perhaps one's pets. And I decided to kind of focus on dogs. And that like kind of led me into looking at different art historical images of dogs. And I was looking at the Capeltine wolf, who is nursing Remus and Romulus, and one of the things that struck me about this canine in these like kind of like images is that she is not a biological mother, but she is mothering these demigods, and her ribs are like emaciated, and the demigods look pretty plump, and her eyes are really tired and droopy looking, and yet you still kind of got this sense that she could become ferocious at a moment's notice. And I started really thinking about this word mother, and I come from a matrilineal tradition, but I also started thinking about, just the role of women in my tribe and other tribal communities, and what, like, I started thinking about what are the characteristics of mothers and how we all share them, and this kind of goes back to this canine, right? Because it wasn't a biological mother, but here it's mothering these twins. And so I have this word in my head, and I'm like, and this does really get to the point, your question about language, I promise. But I have this this word mother in my head, and then I started listening to the song "What's Going On" by Marvin Gaye, and he calls out mother, mother, and so it just made me sort of take notice in a different way. And as Marvin Gaye sings "Mother, Mother, Brother, Brother, Sister, Sister," I thought, well, wow, in an Indigenous way, that call would continue, and it would include grandmother, grandmother, grandfather, grandfather, auntie, auntie, uncle, uncle, and it would include sky, sky, and water, water, and turtle, turtle, and deer, deer, and the call would continue. And I think that was a moment where I started thinking of language as being something that calls back to our ancestors and calls forward to future generations. And so I've been using twinning language in my work, and it kind of grows out of this like relationship with this song, but also with thinking about language. And I think one of the things that's so interesting to me is when you say a word twice, it makes my brain work in a different way, or makes my imagination kind of turn in a different way. And so I think that the words become activated when you hear them twice, and a different picture might come to mind, and it becomes more perhaps more personal. And I think in the case of that song, when Marvin Gaye calls out mother, mother, it makes an urgent message go further in space. It is, again, part of this long history of call and response. And then, as I was saying, just in an Indigenous way, I think it's about calling back to our ancestors and calling forward to future generations. I have to admit, though, that language is really actually using language makes me uncomfortable. And I think that's also one of the reasons why I do it. So language is complicated, and it's well, I guess I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, language is complicated and makes me uncomfortable, and makes me feel awkward. And I suppose maybe it's important to kind of face our demons.
Yeah, another conversation, another time. I'd like to dive into that a little more. This in other conversations I've had, this has sort of come up as well, and I think it's fascinating. So yes, that's a really interesting take, and I'd like to explore that more. Going back to the conversation or the collaboration, it's such a key element of your work, both in process and concept. And you've mentioned earlier that you've collaborated as far as a way of building community. What do you hope that your participants take away from being part of your projects?
I hope that that people find connection in the activity of working side by side with friends and strangers. And I hope that in that connectivity, people, can, I don't know, like really see and lean into this fact that we're all related and connected.
Looking ahead, are there any new projects or mediums that you're excited to explore? What themes are you interested in delving into next?
I am working right now on a project that has some funding from the Native Arts and Cultures Foundation. And this project is called Chords to Other Chords. And I'm working in collaboration with the Forge Project up in the Hudson Valley. And the goal is to have 3 outward facing sculptures, neon sculptures that have the text Turtle Island on them. And one of the things that I'm really interested in is like, what is it like when people see this kind of text ablaze in neon, will they like, I'm not really, I don't think people need to know what Turtle Island means, but I feel like the text itself is very poetic, and I feel like it might conjure, images and associations in people's minds. But I also hope that maybe it might be a prompt for people to look up and learn what Turtle Island is. And I am interested in this question of like, is it possible to, by knowing the name of, okay, let me back up here. I'm like with turtle, I like putting this word out into the world. Also, I think one of the things that I'm excited about is people are affirming something that's important to me by having to say that word. And I also really sort of relish in the fact that I think oftentimes Indigenous artists are put in a position of like having to interpret and educate people about our work and our stories. And I really like that in this particular case, a person can like get their phone out and like look up what Turtle Island means and sort of like learn for them, like kind of take ownership of that process of like learning. And I also am really interested in whether or not by having this phrase out in the world and like understanding that Turtle Island is for like Haudenosaunee people, Turtle Island is North America. For some Indigenous cultures, Turtle Island is the planet Earth. But is it possible if we know this place by a different name, by an Indigenous name? Is it like, can we steward this place differently? And I'm hoping that it will sort of open up conversations about stewardship of place and conversations around food and conversations around Indigenous languages. And so that is the next project that I'm working on. I'm really excited about it.
That's very cool. As someone who's built such an impactful career, what advice would you have for younger artists, especially from Indigenous backgrounds, who are looking to make their mark in the world?
I am so excited by all the work that's being made today by this younger generation of artists. And I think the thing that I have learned is that being an artist requires resilience. There's a lot of rejection, and it doesn't actually even stop. As you get older, there's still a lot of rejection, and I think like really, I think like if I'm going to compare it to something that's important to me, like storytelling, it's like the practice of being an artist is really part of a really long story. And so to be patient and to be kind to yourself and to others. And I think being ambitious is great, but I also think patience is probably the most important thing. So and make what you love and tell the stories that you believe in, because I think that's like the work. Though I hope that in the work I make, that it satisfies something within me, but then, and hopefully in doing that, then maybe it's something that can also have meaning in the world. And in that way, be true to yourself and your audience.
It's great. Maria, this has been such an inspiring conversation. Your work and your approach to storytelling is truly remarkable. And I'm really grateful that you were able to share this with us today.
Thanks, Joe. It's been a pleasure being here.
Definitely look forward to see what's coming next. So to our listeners, I want to thank you for joining us on Beyond the Arts. Be sure to check out Marie's work and stay connected to the powerful conversations that she's creating. So until next time, keep exploring and keep creating and keep telling your stories. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Indigenous art and creativity. Stay inspired and keep exploring with us on Beyond the Arts.
Remember to subscribe and follow us for more exclusive interviews, insightful discussions, and stories that ignite your artistic imagination.
Until next time, continue to unlock your limitless potential with Beyond the Art. Thank you for listening.